And D.L. Hughley and Bev Smith, the radio talk show host. Guys, thanks very much. We're really looking forward to what you're going to do in the next hour. But let's talk, first of all, Bev, about the reaction you're hearing from your listeners all over the country to the arrest of the Harvard University professor Henry Louis Gates. So what are folks saying?
We're outraged. We're outraged that an intellectual, and that's what Henry Gates is. Henry is known all over the world as one of the talented 10th. And as a matter of fact, not only is one of the talented 10th, but he's become a geneticist. He is not unknown in his community, nor is he unknown by the police department. My listeners, we're calling the police department and registering our outrage. We cannot have our leadership treated in such a way. So we're outraged. But we're not surprised, Wolf. We're not surprised.
You know, DL, the police dropped all the charges, and they're trying to make it clear nothing is going forward. Do they owe him, though, an apology?
Well, ultimately, even if you buy the fact that they were acting in good faith and were, investigating what looked like to be a suspicious break-in, after that, once he identified himself, there was no need to kind of do what they did. And I think that obviously they owe him an apology, but I think things like this have a way of eroding all the positive things that have happened. And I think that people are certainly disturbed, and also people throw their hands up and kind of go, things never make that much significant change. And I just think it was just a dumb, once he identified himself, it should have been over at that point. I don't understand how it escalated at that point.
It did certainly escalate. I've been asking a lot of our guests, and I'm going to ask you, DL, have you ever been what you would consider to be racially profiled?
It'd be easier to tell you how many times it hasn't. I mean, growing up, my father had that conversation with me about how to interact when the police stop you. I've had it with my son, and hopefully it'll stop when my son goes to have that conversation with his son. But that's kind of just a reality, and I think the younger you are, I lived in an urban community. I grew up in Los Angeles, and it was a constant thing, and you never really knew where it was coming from. But as you get older, you understand that those things are a reality, and you can't necessarily not be prepared to face those situations. So it was a constant thing.
Racial profiling, Bev, has been around for a long time, but based on everything you see and hear, and I know you got your ear to a lot of listeners out there, is the situation for African Americans getting better?
No, absolutely not. DL and I had a little bit of disagreement on some points around what happened to Skip, because the people in the community where Skip lived for a very long time.
Skip, just to tell our viewers, is Henry Louis Gates, the eminent professor.
Yes, the eminent professor. And the people knew who he was. And let me make this also clear, having lived in an all-white community in Rockville, Maryland, in Montgomery County. The white police officers know who the blacks are in their community. They knew that Professor Gates lived in that home. Just like when I lived in Rockville and Flower Valley, they knew who I was living in the home. So if a report came out, they would approach it differently as they do when there are reports of a suspicious-looking white character around a house. So I don't think it's getting any better. As a matter of fact, I think what's happening is people find themselves freer to make statements that we totally find unfavorable. And I think you're going to see a new kind of movement, as was discussed last week right here in New York for the NAACP. We might have to go back to the streets. We might have to go back to the ballot box for those people who are working against us. We cannot allow this to happen.
I think it would be
hold on, DL, hold your thought. You guys are going to have a whole hour coming up at the top of the hour. We're going to leave it right here, but we're looking forward to hearing a lot more. Remember, our special coverage begins tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern, right at the top of the hour. Moment of Truth, we're calling it, our countdown to Black in America 2.